So what are we playing?
Well, I figured out a little country song, of course. We are in Nashville.
Okay.
It's a song that Steve Earle once recorded with the Don Mercury band.
Okay. What's it called?
It's called I Still Carry You Around.
I think I know that one. Okay.
Yeah. It's just G, D, C, and
Yep. The important chords.
A little B before you go to C.
Okay. Yeah. I'll take your lead.
Sweetheart, last night I dreamed of you. I love you like I used to do. Morning coming, I woke up and found I still carry you around. I still carry you around. Everywhere I travel now. No matter how I try to put you down, I still carry you around. Your turn. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so here we are with the new Taylor guitars.
Yeah, we got some new guitars.
And yeah, how can I start? Yesterday we had the opportunity to meet George Grune.
Yep.
Who knows probably everything about guitars.
He knows a lot of things about a lot of things.
And he said something interesting that he always looks for 5 kinds of balance in a good guitar.
And any instrument, really.
Yeah, that he found it all in the new Taylor. So maybe you can explain what he was talking about.
Well, when George or we look at an instrument, you're trying to evaluate like its musical usefulness. Like, how good is this thing going to work in the hands of a musician? And so to that, you need a couple of basic characteristics. You need the ability to have dynamic range. Okay, so volume. You need projection. You want sustain or length of note. You want balance between the whole register. So you don't want anything to be uneven. You have there's some basic like musical guidelines. These things all have to be uniform, consistent, controllable, so that that instrument could kind of do a musician's dirty work.
Yeah.
You got to be able to play the thing and not worry about making this note sound better than that one or compensating for anything. You want the guitar to just do what you want it to do. So that's kind of what we mean by that.
Yeah. Okay. Was that your goal when you thought about V class, or did it come then later?
Yeah, that's been really on my mind for years. Building mandolins, archtop guitars, flat top guitars, any instrument, you want it to have those musically useful attributes. Now, when I came up with the V class idea, that was pretty interesting because I was sort of tired of pushing little design elements around. With a lot of conventional flat top guitars, you could change one detail to bring out a certain quality, but it usually came at the expense of something else. So if I wanted a little more volume, that meant a little less sustain. Or if I wanted a little more low-end presence, that meant that the high end would suffer. It feels like you just can't get everything that you want. As the saying goes, you want your cake and eat it too. You want it all. Yeah. And so that was a bit of a challenge. So I came up with the V idea. I thought, well, this this is pretty interesting because now I have a lot more independent control over what the parts of the guitar are doing. So I can have the volume, I can have the projection, I can have the sustain that I want. And it allows me to do some other interesting things like this wonderful intonation benefit.
Yeah.
Now, every note is a lot more precisely placed and in tune than it's been before, because the resonance of the body isn't necessarily throwing those different notes off of what they really wanted to be. One of the most exciting aspects for me was it gives me the opportunity to radically change the character of the guitar.
Yeah.
So not just whether it's like a trebly sounding guitar or a bassy sounding guitar or anything like that. It's as if the shape of each note changes. So with the grand auditorium guitars that you first saw introduced last year, those are very modern sounding guitars. Yeah. They're very brilliant, real vibrant. They're very precise and articulate. So every note kind of sits exactly in its spot, and it's a very modern thing. And I love the music that people are making with it. A lot of musicians have really taken to those, and that's great. And it's not the only thing that I love. I like other kinds of sounds too.
Yes, of course.
You know, I want sounds that have big broad notes on some days. You want a note that just kind of settles and it flows in and out and it takes a big space, and you want it, of course, to be in tune, but there's kind of like a broad warmth to its clarity. And so that's what this guitar was designed for.
Yeah.
It has a real familiar characteristic that reminds me a lot of the records I used to listen to.
Yeah, that's really what it does. Yeah. It seems to me you have a really strong relation to musicians around you and music itself. In which way is that important to you, to be close to the musicians?
Yeah, I don't know that I could separate myself from that. I think it has to be that way. Like that, really, this guitar doesn't sound like anything until somebody starts playing it. It doesn't sound like a darn thing right now. It's meant for playing songs. It's meant to live in the hands of a musician. It's meant to make their musical artwork. It's kind of the voice that they choose to go, I'm going to express myself with this. And so for me, building and playing has always gone hand in hand. And I think that it's a mistake for any maker to get too far away from that.
Okay. And I mean, it's a kind of a creative effort that you have to do. And are you sometimes afraid you run out of ideas?
No, actually. The thing that I get afraid of is that there's so much that is so interesting and so worth pursuing. Some days I worry that I won't live long enough to do all the things that I'm interested in trying.
Okay.
Because every time you learn something, you see something, you make something, you hear something, it makes you think of a million other ideas or a million other things that you'd like to know more about. If you look around you, you kind of have to think that just about everything is miraculous. It's like you look at the very pieces of wood that this thing is made of, go, how could I not spend a lifetime studying about that? That is just incredible, the way that this piece of wood grows. It's just fascinating.
Yes,
but everything you look at is that way. You look at music and think, man, this is like this never-ending well, where you can jump into it and everything that you learn about it, every song you learn, every note, you realize how much more there is to discover.
Cool. Yeah.
So I don't see a bottom to that well. That's just going to go on for a long time.
Good. Great. So maybe let's just get back to one detail of the first thing I fell in love with when I grabbed that guitar was the neck.
Yeah.
So how did you figure out that?
So I've played a lot of guitars and I've watched a lot of guitar players. And one of the things I've noticed is that none of us actually hold our hands the same way as we play, right?
Right.
You know, when you study like traditional, like classical guitar performance, you're holding the guitar in a different posture to try and make your wrist as relaxed as possible. and most of us don't do that. So what happens is when we play lower on the fingerboard, we wrap our thumb a little more, and when we move up here, well, our thumb's probably not in the same position. It tends to move a little bit to keep your wrist comfortable. And so the thought occurred to me, like, it doesn't make that much sense to me that every neck would be a consistent profile, a consistent shape the whole way, when my hand certainly isn't a consistent position the whole way. So this neck is altered a little bit to make it comfortable everywhere. So it actually shifts in profile from here to here. So that, combined with the way that this fingerboard edge is actually rolled into the fingerboard, so there's no real sharp corners anywhere. In fact, anywhere on the whole guitar, even the body edges, everything's been chamfered off. It's got this real unique edge treatment. The bridge itself, everything's kind of eased a bit to make it real comfortable and approachable in your hands. It feels instantly familiar.
It does. It does. So these guitars, they really sound different than Taylor guitars that you made before. What could I tell a Taylor fan that was a fan for, since your guitars are here? What can I tell him? How much Taylor is in it, and what is new about the sound aspects?
I suppose I'd have to ask first what that Taylor sound is, because a lot of people, rightly so, they think of our guitars and go, well, that's a modern sounding guitar.
Yeah.
Some people would say, well, it's an acoustic guitar for an electric guitar player, because they like the low action and the playability. Well, yeah, there's some truth to that, but that's not the only thing that's good. There's a lot of different personalities, a lot of different sounds that we can make that are both modern. They have wonderful balance and intonation and playability, but the character can change. It's kind of like you don't eat the same thing for lunch every day.
That's right.
There's a lot of different flavors that are really nice. It's hard to choose a favorite. So with this one, yeah, you're going to hear a very Taylor-esque balance to it. You'll hear kind of a vibrant character, but it definitely has a different shape to the notes. These notes they're a bit more broad. They start to blend together a bit more instead of separating from each other. It's a real different personality.
Yeah, and somehow you manage to make the words sound like they sound, and they are very different in their appearance.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting aspects with the V-class idea, is that a rosewood guitar, that sounds a bit like rosewood. Rosewood has a real specific personality, has a unique dampening characteristic. It tends to be real harmonically rich. And a lot of other woods, they'll have their own unique flavor. And in a conventional design, those flavors are, honestly, they're pretty subtle. For a lot of people, they'll listen to it and go, well, it sounds like a guitar. That one sounds like a guitar too. Okay, that's the level that we can listen at. And using this construction method for the guitar, we have the ability to exaggerate all those uniquenesses. So a rosewood guitar, man, it's like even more rosewoodish than before. Like you can really tell the flavor of it. The mahogany version, it's really not the same guitar. Yeah. They're very, very different. And so all these unique changes between the woods, they become more noticeable and more apparent. And I love that aspect. Yeah. I don't believe that one size fits all. Yeah. It usually means one size fits everyone poorly.
Yeah. Do you have a certain musician in mind, or a certain genre or style when you talk about it?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd say there's a specific musician. I'd say mostly these are guitars for guitar players, because I've seen some of the most traditionally minded musicians I could name, kind of take hold of this guitar and like claim it as their own. And at the same time, I've seen some of the most modern, cutting-edge guitar players take this thing, pick it up and start playing, go, oh no, this one's ours. The finger stylists, all these players going, oh no, I can find my own sound in this. This is familiar, it feels good, but it has this like almost general purpose, like musically useful character. Like a good violin is an interesting comparison. You have one instrument that is totally at home in a symphonic orchestra, or it could be used in a bluegrass band, or a country band, or in a rock band, or playing some jazz or some swing music. That one instrument's going to go a lot of different places.
Of course, yeah.
A great piano will do the same thing. I mean, you look at a beautiful Steinway or Baldwin piano, and you get someone like Vladimir Horowitz playing it, or you get someone like McCoy Tyner playing it. You go, how can this one instrument do these different things, and it just always sounds good?
Yeah.
It's amazing to me.
Mm.
So I see some of that quality in this instrument, where when different musicians pick it up, they're instantly comfortable on it, and they can make their music with it.
Yeah. Okay. When I think of V-class bracing, was there something like an initial moment when you came to that idea, or initial situation or something?
Yeah, actually we had, early in 2014, we had just launched our 800 series guitars. And, that was great. They were like the most Taylor guitars we've ever built. I was really thrilled with the way they were working. And I kind of went back to the shop a week or two later. I'm thinking, okay, so now what? How do we do something better? What should we be working on next? Well, I'd like to have more. I'd like there to be a better guitar. I want the next guitar I make to be the best one ever.
Yeah.
And so one morning I'm an avid ocean person, so I go down to go check the surf. I thought it was going to be really good, and I got skunked. A storm had blown through in the night, and the ocean was just a complete mess. So I'm standing on the bluff looking at it. It's early in the morning. I'm going, well, in some ways, this is still kind of what my guitars are doing. I can see that there's swell in the water. The potential is here, but I'm still kind of inhibited by some of this other unusual motion and these weird resonances and things that are going on. Okay, well, I don't really know how to get around that yet. A couple days later go by, and the weather cleans up, and I go surfing again. It's gorgeous, couldn't be more different. Beautiful, smooth, just orderly. And I'm watching this go, well, this is what I'm after. I'd like to build a guitar that does this. So I kind of drew out this little sketch in one of my shop notebooks and went, oh, well, if I try this, that might do it. So I went back to the shop, tried it, got like halfway through building this guitar and went, oh dear, what have I done? This will be interesting. I saw even before the first guitar was done that there was all kinds of possibilities for that.
Yeah. And the first one really did it.
It was pretty fascinating guitar.
Yeah.
I still have that guitar.
Yeah.
And it's a good couple, 4 or 5 years in now.
Yeah.
And that guitar sounds good. And then I took that, built another one, went, okay, well, that's not a fluke. Now let's keep going. In fact, something largely like this was the third guitar that I made with that idea. Because I realized after these first two, like, oh, well, this would allow me to do this, and I could change this, and I could do this, and all those ideas kind of start popping in your head.
Cool. You're in a fine position to work for a company that gives you that space to try out all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we're fortunate. I mean, we're a company built of guitar players and musicians, and we exist to serve our musician friends. We want to make these instruments using the best materials that we can get, do no harm to the world that we live in, and offer something to musicians that gives them creativity and a lot of range of expression for the music they want to make. Yeah. It's a really rewarding spot to be in. It's an exciting time to be a guitar maker.
Yeah, cool. So I think...
Should we play?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
You want to play?
Yeah, we always want to play.
What do you want to play?
Whatever you got. Take another chorus on that tune there.
Really? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. just can't believe you're gone. Your memory haunts me from now on. I walk the streets of this old lonely town. I still carry you around. Now I still carry you around. Everywhere I travel now. No matter how I try to put you down, I still carry you around. There you go. Thank you.
So here's a guitar. This was actually what I had in mind when I first did the V-class guitars. At the time, for those of you who were at my house last year, you know, when I say I built that house, what I mean was that every night, every weekend for a long while, I built that house. And we call it the work of art. Well, it's the actual work part that comes with art. It's the heavy lifting that you do and the nail pounding. Around the time that we launched the 800 series guitars, well, I was listening to a lot of bluegrass. I was listening to all those songs from my childhood going, man, I'm doing carpentry work again. Okay, great. I'm gonna build a house for my wife and kids, and yeah, I gotta get through the day. Okay, well, I'm working on a Sunday again. That's all right. It's good. We're gonna get this done. And so I'm listening to all these sounds, and it's all fresh in my mind. I go, you know, I'd really love to have a guitar that does that. I don't have one like that. We don't make anything like that. So I had this idea about the V-class thing. The first guitar I put it in was a dreadnought. It was a conventional dreadnought. I go, well, this is the closest shape. This is the closest thing that I've got immediately at hand to start with. So I built that first guitar and went, oh, good night. What have I just done? This is really interesting. Built another one like that. Thought, okay, well, once is interesting. Two is definitely not a fluke. This has got something good going. I need a better shape because this shape won't do it. This is, let me make something different. I need something cooler. And so this guitar, I started with a dreadnought, I guess, but it's not really a dreadnought anymore. It's kind of a dreadnought, sort of, if you squint your eyes just right. It's kind of a slope shoulder thing. Sort of like the, what Gibson used to call jumbos. But it's not. It's its own sort of thing. It's its own guitar.
So we are going to call it a round shoulder dreadnought. That's kind of where we've planted our flag. But we're calling it the Grand Pacific. So we have grand auditoriums and grand concerts and grand orchestras. Yeah. So we're kind of like, we're calling it the Grand Pacific Dreadnought. And it was interesting when we were reading the Reverb article, because I think there's two worlds. Some people talk about dreadnoughts and they only think of square shoulder, and then they would call kind of sloped or round shoulder jumbos. And then there's another camp, which when we read the Reverb, who was saying, let's talk about dreadnoughts, square shouldered versus round shouldered. And less from Andy and more from a business, we're like, we're just going to call this a round shoulder dreadnought. It is a guitar. To Andy, it's a guitar.
It's a guitar. Makes songs.
For us, putting it in the world, kind of giving it a place of familiarity for people, we're calling it a round shoulder dreadnought. So we were like, we like that article. Let's stay in that world. So thank
it's
you
like
to Reverb. Yes, exactly.
Like I said, you have to covet. You can describe anything as long as you have a comparison. So I go, okay, well, the closest thing that I could compare it to is kind of a dreadnought, sort of. If you squint your eyes just right from the right angle, it kind of looks like one maybe. but it's its own sort of thing.
So let's talk about the model. So what are we doing for 2019? We have decided to introduce this Grand Pacific Dreadnought, Grand Pacific Round Shoulder Dreadnought. You choose, marinate on that. In 3 models. So let's just do a little rundown. You can talk about this one.
Yeah, okay, this is, a lot of you guys, you are introduced to what we call the Builder's Edition. Now that's a guitar that's built with this idea that there's only 2 ways to make a guitar better. You make it feel better, you make it sound better. Everything you do as a builder will fall into one of those 2 camps. Okay, so this one feels better. This is a Builder's Edition 717.
For our US line, we are no longer making a traditional Dreadnought. So this is a 717. So you'll see 3 guitars that we'll go through, and they're differentiated by their back and sides. The first 2, the 717 and the next one, which is a 517, which is mahogany, are both Builder's Editions. And the Builder's Editions has been a real success for us because it's like, I always say, it's like the mind of Andy applied to this series. It's what if he wants to make a little tweak. The whole thing is Andy, but these guitars move a little bit outside the standard series. It gives him a little bit more room to play. So talk about the Builder's Edition
so
for
in
these
this case,
Grand Pacifics.
What you guys saw on a Grand Auditorium Builder's Edition was this super fancy compound cutaway, armrest, stuff that makes the guitar really comfortable. In this case, I wanted what I call a full body guitar. No armrest, no cutaway. Don't ask. It won't come that way. Okay? To make this thing, I wanted it to be that way. But I do want it comfortable. So these guitars, kind of the first in a long, long while for Taylor, has a totally different neck. It's a totally different neck shape than anything we've ever done. You'll see, it's pretty easy to see when you look at it up close, but even the shape of the heel is different. Because when I run my thumb into it, I don't want to point. I don't like pointy things. They're painful usually. One of the most interesting things that I can't, for the life of me, I couldn't figure it out as a guitar maker is why we make a neck with one profile that goes from here to here. My hand certainly isn't the same as I go from here to here. Why should the neck be that way? Down here, when I play, your thumb will wrap around the fingerboard or wrap around the neck a bit more. That's just the way that your hand is shaped. So down here, you'll notice like a tiny bit of it's like the most subtle V that you could ever feel. It's just barely there. It's enough that it's really comfortable. But by the time you get up here, your thumb is in the middle of the neck. It's not wrapped around. You're not going to be doing this very much. So no one really likes a V-shaped neck up here. You want it round over here. So this is a neck that we call it a compound carved neck because it's actually changing in shape as you go up the fingerboard to match the hand's natural position of how we play. The fingerboard edges are treated differently. You'll notice that they're kind of like rolled into the fingerboard. It feels like the guitar has already kind of been played for a while, maybe refretted once or twice, where that hard edge is just gone. It's just not there anymore. Even you notice for the first time in probably 30 or 35 years, this guitar doesn't have a typical Taylor bridge shape. Bridge shape is known within the guitar making world as sort of trade dress. It's like an identifier of the maker. And in this case, I built the first couple of them and went, the way that I play this guitar, the way I hold my picking hand, this bridge, I want the point to be gone. I want this to be a little more comfortable for my hand to touch. So I designed something new that's pretty reminiscent of what we do. It doesn't hit you over the head, it taps you on the shoulder, but it sits in your hand a bit different. The edges of the body are chamfered off like the other Builder's Edition guitars. Because again, something that has that real beveled off clean edge treatment, it sits on your lap a lot more comfortably. It sits on your leg more comfortably. You play it more relaxed. between these two guitars.
So that's the 717
Yeah, that's a 7.
rosewood back and sides. It's got our wild honey burst on the top. It also will come in a natural top. So for our dealers, we'll have that option of a bursted top. And that's a builder's edition. So this then is the builder's edition 517, 5 denoting the 500 series, which is mahogany back and sides.
And if you notice, these guitars look almost identical because they are almost identical. What I wanted to do was not make a more fancy and a less fancy version. To me, these are two very traditional flavors. It's a rosewood spruce guitar, it's a mahogany spruce guitar. But in the musician world, those are two totally different things. They are as different as chocolate and vanilla. Both wonderful.
Can you play and just talk a little bit about the sounds?
Okay, so this one, a rosewood guitar, it's, I don't know, sounds and words. It sounds wet. Rosewood has this unique characteristic where it's harmonically complex because it doesn't dampen or mute any of the string's own harmonic content, and it adds some of its own. So every note that you play has this really thick, rich kind of feel. Mahogany goes the opposite direction, and it's dry. It's dry and clear. It's warm, but a lot of times you'll hear the word woody. It sounds like sawdust or something. So these notes, the note you play is the note you get. And that's a wonderful thing. But because they're such different flavors, and I wanted both of them, I thought, well, I'm going to make the guitars look the same, and I'm going to make these two distinct flavors of it so that guitar players have the choice. They both matter, they both deserve to live, but they are not the same guitar. They have the same characteristics in some ways. They've got the volume, they've got the projection, they've got that kind of fistful of power. But the actual sonority, the personality, it's different. So you'll see the same kind of details, same neck, that compound carved neck, same inlay pattern, same color. It's just a choice.
So the 517 Builders Edition, 717 Builders Edition will be launched at NAMM, and they have the compound carved neck and an option of the top, whether it's bursted or not. So there's options, and I think for those doing reviews, we'd like to have a conversation. Our plan is actually to send you both Builders Editions for review. So you can have both of them early October. And we're thinking that we might maybe send you a natural top on one and a bursted top. So, because they do look the same. In a magazine, they're gonna look like the same guitar, but a lot of people, especially with rosewood, would prefer a natural top, will like a natural top. So that's something we can talk about, what you'd like to get your hands on, what you'd like to review. So there's 3 guitars, so the third guitar is in our 300 series. So it's a 317. Non-Builder's Edition. So this sits inside our standard 300 series.
This guitar, I like that musicians go play songs. And a lot of them are not going to have deep pockets because that's the way guitar players are. I've been there. But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't have something really good to play. So I wanted to build at least one of these guitars at the most approachable spot that I could possibly begin with. So this one, like Tim said, this is a 317, Sapele back and sides, Sitka spruce top. A lot of these are typical Taylor elements. You see a typical Taylor bridge, typical Taylor neck. It's a wonderful thing. Sound-wise, that Sapele, it's almost like halfway in between the two. Again, it's a third voice that has a lot of these same characteristics. But this is a guitar that, unlike those first builder's editions that were really nice to dream about for a lot of players, this one, you could actually justify that and take it to your open mic night. And take it to the club dates and the bar gigs and be busking on a street corner and all the things that guitar players do. So this was, to me, this was a really important thing to get to introduce. Well, like you guys understand, there was, with the V-Class idea, it was a way to try and get more control over the kinds of things we wanted to build. Like as it started, well, we have this kind of flexibility and stiffness conundrum that I was trying to wrap my head around, where you go, well, volume comes from flexibility and sustain comes from stiffness. How do you balance these two and make something good? Well, this idea allows that. And once we discovered, wow, you can do this, holy smokes, there's all kinds of cool stuff you can do. You can make the intonation get really good, like it was an electric guitar or something. Way cooler stuff that you can build into that guitar on purpose. You're not just taking shots in the dark and going, well, I can tweak it a little here at the expense of this, or I could tweak it a little here at the expense of that. This gives us a lot of options. That idea had come kind of in the wake of relaunching our 800 series guitars. So right at the beginning of 2014, we relaunched our 800 series guitars, kind of our quintessential, our quintessential 814. Now, this is a great guitar. It's like I said, it's the quintessential modern Taylor guitar. Love the thing. They're welcomed in studios all over the place. A lot of great music has been built with this. The fact of the matter is, this is what I consider a very modern sound. There's a Taylor sound. I get it. That's what we're known for. We have been known for making slim necks with low action, guitars that intonate well, and they come in this flavor that's a distinctly modern sound. It works really good for a lot of music that people want to make. And I love it for that reason. But that's not the only thing that I love. It's kind of like you don't really want to eat the same thing for lunch every day. It's good, but it gets a little boring sometimes. So what some of you don't realize was that although we introduced the V-Class idea in the form of a GA first, and we're building all of our El Cajon built GAs with this idea, that wasn't actually where I started. I started with something entirely different. So I had this idea and went, okay, well, I don't want to get too far out in left field. Let me reel this back in a little bit and put it into a context where the musicians that we serve, they can understand it. They can wrap their head around it. It's familiar enough to go, hey, okay, I recognize that as a Taylor. I'm familiar with the way Taylors sound. I'm familiar with the way they work. And again, wow, this is like an even more modern version of a Taylor. Got unbelievably long sustain. Just kind of ridiculous. You have good volume. You get all these wonderful things out of this idea. This crazy intonation. I love that. But like I said, that's not all of what I like. And so when I look at the design, I think, well, it was like a cul-de-sac. There was only so much that we could do building on the platform that we were working with. So this guitar, as you were first introduced to it last year, this is kind of page 1 of chapter 2, as we see it. It's getting into a different lane on the freeway, to use a different metaphor. But what we wanted to show you today was page 2 of chapter 2, something that is very different.
was interesting, you know, for us is when I read the V-class reviews on the VA, they were amazing. And often they ended with the same punctuation. Sounds like a Taylor. Which it was. It was in the Taylor shape. It was, as Andy said, it was as Taylor.
It was more tailored than Taylor's ever
Yeah.
been. This guitar, every note on this thing feels wide to me. I could play a single note, just go, man, it's broad. It takes up a lot of space, it's accurate, but because of that, all of these sounds, they'll all kind of blend together with this kind of comforting sort of harmony. It's sort of a sentimental sort of sound, but it's a familiar sound. It's part of our guitar playing DNA. Okay, that's something that we've never had. The notes on that guitar, like I said, there's an articulation there. There's a precision in every single one of them. Almost like if I drew a shape for the note. The notes on that guitar are almost like, yeah, they're almost like triangular shaped notes. You've got this thing where if I played the same chords, yeah, they're all really in tune with each other. Beautiful harmony, but you can hear each note distinctly. You know, there's a it sounds almost like a piano, where every note is there, it's well defined, it lives in its place. That's good. Works for a lot of modern music. It works amazingly well for a fingerstyle player or anybody who's taking cues from a pianist. You know, playing contrapuntal kind of stuff. Or for somebody fronting a rock band doing that kind of thing. It's amazing. It's bright, it's brilliant, it's vibrant. It's got this modern kind of extroverted sort of thing, right? This one to me is like, this one's like the friend that you've had since grade school. It's like, man, I remember stuff that sounded like that. So one of the most absent things that I noticed in those old records, when I'd have the guitar there and listen and go, these don't match. Well, it's the stuff you take away from it. So in this case, I describe it as like a puff of air, that whoosh sound that happens with a lot of guitars. It's the whoosh sound of air that happens when you say the letter P. So every one of us has seen a picture of a vocalist in a studio with what we call a windscreen or a pop filter. And then there's a microphone right behind him. Okay? Because when you say the letter P or B, there's this pop of air that rushes out. Well, guitars actually do the same thing. Okay? They have this thing on them, especially with a big body guitar. Anything broad with a broad waist has this whoosh thing. Now, that ends up being a problem. You can't record it. You can't mic it. You can't amplify it. And when you play with other musicians, it gets in the way.
In some ways, that's what you were hearing in the recording because it's often fixed in the studio.
Yeah, typically we just trim stuff out. You put a mic there and you go, oh, well that problem thing, okay, EQ, that's right around 110, 100 hertz. That part disappears. Okay, well that part is interfering with all the notes you're playing. It's throwing your intonation or it's stepping on your vocal take, it's stepping on this, it's on that. Or it's causing feedback when you amplify it. I can't really get rid of it until I had this idea. Because this V idea allows you enough control to go, I don't want that part there? Sure, I'll take that out. problem solved. So when we play these guitars, it's clear power. It's got a thing. It has the parts that I love about an old guitar. Without stuff that I need to fix. My dad's a carpenter, and that's what he's done since longer than I've been around. He's a woodworker, but mostly with houses. It's a really good one. But in our house, he brought in this collection of music. He grew up in Southern California as a long-haired hippie surfer kind of guy, and started welcoming all this bluegrass music in. And the connection was pretty straightforward when you think about all of the country rock that started happening up in the Los Angeles area back in the late 60s and early 70s. So my parents, they got into, of course, the Eagles, a lot of the songwriters coming out of Laurel Canyon. You heard guys like the Byrds turning into like the Flying Burrito Brothers with Chris Hillman playing. So he got into a lot of this country rock music, and that turned into just old-time bluegrass before too long. So those acts, they were bringing in musicians from a different era, different generation, mostly from Nashville. So you'd see guys like Sneaky Pete playing pedal steel in a modern country rock outfit. You go, well, wow, that guy's really good. What did he do? So those acts quickly turned into like the Louvin Brothers, Flatt and Scruggs, Doc Watson, those kind of musicians. Now, my dad being a carpenter, we used music not so much for entertainment value. A lot of times we think of music as, well, it's entertainment. And that's true to an extent. But a lot of us who work, and by work it's the chop wood, carry water parts of life, we use it as a way to get through your day. So my dad being a carpenter would listen to bluegrass and country music all day long, because you knew you could go through about 4 records between a morning coffee break and lunchtime. You get through 5 in the afternoon. It paces you well, it kind of accompanies you, it doesn't make you feel depressed or sad or angry by the end of the day. It's a way to kind of get through your life. So in a modern way, it's not much different than the way some of the country musicians used to sing field songs, work songs while they're working on a farm or out in the field. It's a pretty traditional thing. So I grew up with this kind of music in our house and working with my dad I've dug more than my fair share of ditches listening to the Louvin Brothers. And so when I think about those songs and I listen to those sounds, I go, man, they're great stories. They're honest stories. There's some incredible musicians making these sounds. And these sounds, they're not modern. They're not what these guitars do. So I love what this guitar does, but it's not the only thing that I feel like doing. It's not the only sound that I want to make. What was really tricky for me is during my restoration days when I'd build, I'd repair, I'd restore old guitars for people. I did a lot of that for a lot of years. And what was weird is I started noticing that the sounds I associated with those records, and I'd work on the instruments that made those sounds, I go, there's something odd here because this isn't quite it. When I listen to the record and I listen to the guitar that made the record, I go, well, this isn't the sound. What gives here? I'm playing that song with the guitar that made it. I go, oh, well, I wasn't actually there. I wasn't listening to those musicians in person. I was listening to those musicians played in this studio. In studios around here like this. It was like a composite sound. It was the sound of this guitar with its warts fixed. It was the sound of a guitar through a microphone, through EQ, onto tape, onto a record. Well, that's not quite the same thing. So I take that and think, well, if I can't actually make this sound that I love, I should build a guitar that does that. I should build something that makes those kind of flavors, those things that are reminiscent, kind of a sentimental thing. This guitar is vibrant and bright and beautiful. It's brilliant. It feels like the sunshine at midday. It's like that bright white pure light, just vibrant and alive. And those sounds that I'd hear on records, they felt more like the color of sunlight you'd see just before sunset, where everything kind of glows and it's warm and it's inviting and friendly. It's different.
Yeah.
It's both bright and beautiful and wonderful. It's just a different feel.
Yeah.
You know, it would be, this sounds like your third cup of coffee. And some of those sounds are like the pint you have after you're done with the day. Thanks. I feel like a kid in a candy store doing that.
Well, these are by far the best tailors I've ever heard, but they're also some of the finest new guitars I've ever played. They're right on up there with some custom luthier-built instruments that are $20,000 plus. These are more musical sounding than most of the luthier-built instruments. They're very special. I listen for 5 basic things when I'm trying guitar. It's 5 types of balance. A lot of people, when they think of balance, they just think that each note and each string should be equal in volume. That's true. That's one kind of balance. So we talk about balance of volume. I think everybody knows what that is. But there's also balance of sustain. You hit a chord, do some strings ring longer than others? If that's the case, then they're not really balanced. They should be equal in sustain, and also the notes up and down the board should be fairly equal in sustain, so it's controllable. I also want to hear balance of dynamic range. I want to be able to hit the note soft, medium, or loud. I want to be able to have an instrument that you can drive really hard, but also sings beautifully, medium, or softly, because the tone is different, and not all music is monotone. It's like when people speak or they sing, it'd be very boring if they did everything at exactly the same volume in a complete monotone. It would put you to sleep and it would not be musically satisfying. So the instrument should have dynamic range. It should also have a balance of complexity of tone. Every note has a fundamental note, and it has harmonics above and below that fundamental. That's why, for example, a violin and a viola have 3 of the 4 strings tuned the same. It's just the viola has a low C and the violin has a high E, but the middle 3 strings are the same. But if you play a passage using just the 3 strings and play it on violin versus viola, you can instantly tell which is which. They don't sound the same because the harmonic structure is different. But it's also important that you don't have just rich, beautiful basses with thin, tinny trebles, or beautiful singing trebles and lackluster basses, so that there's a real challenge to have a guitar that's balanced throughout. And last, I want to hear balance of clear articulation of notes. Some instruments may have crisp, clear trebles and thuddy, thumpy, fuzzy basses, or vice versa. So if you get all 5 of those things going, you can still have different voices. The fact is, an arch top doesn't sound the same as a flat top, and a rosewood
it's
guitar
different
doesn't
harmonic
sound the same
structure.
as a mahogany guitar. But if it's lacking any one of those 5, it's not as good as it could be.
Absolutely.
And these guitars do that. These are the first tailors I've heard that, for me, do all of it. And they're very special. These things stack up extremely well to some of the vintage instruments. And you know, you guys are playing a variety of things. You could have done what you did on an arch top and it would have sounded
Oh,
good.
yeah.
You can play jazz on that guitar. You can play blues on it. You can play simple first position Carter family or Woody Guthrie style. You can do a much more versatile style. That guitar will do many, many things. And I think it is not only, in my opinion, the best sounding Taylors I've heard, but they're also the most versatile. I think Taylor's making the best guitars they've ever made in the history of the company. The quality of new guitars made today is better than it was when I opened up my store. And that was 48 and a half years ago. So even if we go back 50 years, the quality of new guitars 50 years ago was not as good as it is today. The necks were bowed, the neck sets were bad, and the guitars were virtually unplayable, and they were new.
Yeah.
So today, even a cheap student guitar has higher quality of playability. You get a Taylor guitar made in Mexico, it's made with very similar tooling to what you make in the California factory. It may have laminated back and sides, but it sounds good, it plays well, it intonates well. And what the student gets today is vastly better than what you got in the 60s. When it comes right down to it, what makes a guitar good is not how old it is. It's first and foremost the design. Without a good design, it doesn't matter how good the workmanship or the materials are. It's just like being up in an airplane. If you're 40,000 feet up in the air and it has a bad aerodynamic design, it can have wonderful materials, it can have great workmanship, it can have gold-plated fixtures and mahogany paneling, you'll die. And a lot of my time is spent answering questions and often enough giving free info, which is really part of the job.
Yeah.
If you don't educate people so that they'll know more about the instruments, you can't expect them to appreciate them in depth. You can't really expect them to want what they don't understand. And in effect, spreading the word about what these instruments are, what they can do, what makes them special is important.